Welcome to another edition of the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm your host, Aaron Dykes. Today is Monday, April 16th, 2012.
Tonight on the INFOWARS Nightly News, Obama's Secret Service agents punished for carousing with Colombian hookers. But is this just disinfo to keep public opinion away from something more diabolical? Plus, Darren McBreen returns from Roswell, Georgia to file a report on the local Agenda 21 tactics that took a man's life. Then, we speak with Noble Live filmmaker Holland Vanden Nieuwenhof and lead investigator of the Oklahoma Bombing Investigation Committee, Dale Phillips, on the upcoming anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombings. All that and more on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
And so it's April 16th. As the tax deadline looms, we have a story on taxes for you. Federal bureaucrat, government and taxes are the American dream. Report up on INFOWARS by Kurt Nimmo. So people have always been angry about taxes, and all the more because it goes to fund the unconstitutional private Federal Reserve Bank that charges us for all the money they loan to the government, and we pay it back each year in the forms of taxes. And you heard Reagan's report from the 80s, not one stinking dime goes to pay for any of the federal budget or any of it. It's all just to the wrong stuff. But finally, we have a government official willing to put her voice on the line to speak for principles and what the American dream is really all about when it comes to taxes. Here are the words of Secretary of Labor Hilda Solis.
I want to tell you that we need to stand up, and we must not forget that at this critical moment in time, we have to understand what the president is fighting for. And the president is fighting right there with you and I. And it's about fairness. It's about fairness in the workplace. It's about fairness in education. And it's about fairness in terms of what services are provided by government. And if we can't have a say-so in that, then this isn't the dream that all of us have aspired to be a part of. Because if people aren't paying their taxes, those that can afford it, the billionaires, the millionaires, even the folks, as you heard yesterday, that were in the White House, that agreed to pay more. They want to pay more because they know it's their obligation, because that's what we stand by, those principles. That's very, very important for us to understand what the president is fighting for fairness.
So there's the fairness and the principles. The president is fighting so they can tack on more government services. You could continue to pay for them, and they're going to pass the Buffett rule to give the illusion of taxing the rich when it's really just squeezing the middle class and, yes, some nouveau riche people. But the real billionaires, the real wealth is all offshore. They're all in foundations. Little clubs are all a part of. None of them pay taxes. You got all the tax cheats in government, but they're coming for your money. That's Agenda 21. That's the clampdown on America. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. There's been all the outrage about killing American citizens overseas through drones, the Anwar al-Awlaki case. That got worse after Obama said, yeah, we got the right to do it. We'll do it when we need to. Then they passed the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, putting on paper they can indefinitely detain Americans for whatever reason they want, no due process. Now, this incredible report continues to surface as they try to push it through Congress. IRS travel ban, revoking citizenship by stealth. So that's up by Paul Joseph Watson and Alex Jones, getting into how there is no requirement that the taxpayer be guilty or even charged with tax evasion, fraud, or criminal offense, only that the citizen is alleged to owe the IRS back taxes of $50,000 or more. So yes, you're hearing that now. Travel bans, you won't be allowed to fly out of the country. Your passport will be revoked. You won't be issued a passport if you're accused of owing the IRS money. And it goes on to explain how there is no judicial determination, only an IRS determination, and that is enough to restrict your constitutional rights to freedom of travel and on, all without any kind of due process. Don't you see what direction this is going between the assassinations, the indefinite detention, and now this IRS thing? There's just no due process. They're just destroying the country and saying they're going to do whatever you want. And so what's going to happen if unconstitutional government health care continues to go through and people refuse to pay those taxes en masse? Maybe a lot of individuals won't be at the $50,000 level, but will we see a greater federal response on that basis too, that now it doesn't need to be $50,000 to deny your passport? Now we'll just deny eye for anyone who's going against current government policy, because they have the right to determine what services you're going to pay for. That's part of the dream of America, is to argue for more and more taxes. And if you don't like it, you don't go anywhere, and they might come kill you. Just incredible. Probably in different words, Alex has a report summing up on how really this IRS travel ban amounts to internal checkpoints, greater suspicion in America. It is part of the police state. Here's that report now.
My friends, do you know one of the key hallmarks of a hardcore police state, whether it was Soviet Russia or Nazi Germany? Governments would take political dissidents' passports away. In the United States, that's only done if you've been charged with espionage or if you're out on bail for a serious crime. The IRS has written a law that's passed the Senate and is now in the House, and Forbes and other publications are reporting on it like it's no big deal. Hey, if the IRS says you owe back taxes, you're not going to be allowed to travel outside the country. They're going to take your passport. How many times have I told you this was coming? This is exactly what the IMF and World Bank, the consortium for the international arm of the private Federal Reserve, have called for more than 15 years. A global cashless society. Already many jobs, you've got to get TSA approval and authorization to have them. I saw Homeland Security 9 years ago on C-SPAN say, you're not going to get on a plane if you haven't paid your taxes. You're not going to get a driver's license. You're not going to be allowed to work. This is total enslavement. This is beyond anything we've seen in history. It is incredibly illegal. Travel is a right, not a privilege. A passport is a right as a citizen. This represents withdrawing and revoking your citizenship. That's what it is under another name. They tried to pass a bill last year for any reason the president wishes outside of a court to take your citizenship away, and then they say they can secretly arrest you or kill you. When he couldn't get that passed, he just signed the NDAA and said he can secretly arrest you or kill you. Well, a law that's unconstitutional is null and void. Marbury versus Madison. What this represents is capital controls. When governments start to collapse throughout history, they always try to clamp down on people leaving the country with money. Bottom line, the IRS is the collection agency for the private Federal Reserve. Pre-1913, dollars that were fiat were backed partially by silver and gold and said United States note on them. After 1913, they said Federal Reserve note. In '63, Kennedy reissued $5 bills that said United States note on them, and he signed an executive order to begin the abolishment of the private Federal Reserve and its collection agency of the IRS. That's why the banksters killed him. My point is, yes, a country has to have taxes, but these aren't taxes. These are levies to private international banks. Just as Europe admits they're now under Goldman Sachs dictatorship. Not through money they owe. Goldman Sachs got their governments to sign on to the derivative fraud they created. This is so incredible. And now the banksters are saying, if you don't pay all the taxes we want directly into our private coffers of the Federal Reserve, outside of a court, outside of a conviction, outside of law, we're going to put you on a no-fly list. Just like Rahm Emanuel, former chief of staff at the White House, said at a gun grabber meeting. He said, look, if you're on a no-fly list, over 2 million Americans are on that, by the way, you're not going to be able to buy a gun.
That is, if you are on the no-fly list because you are known as maybe a possible terrorist, you cannot buy a handgun in America.
One of the things you don't know about is the number of people that we have turned away because their name has been on the watch list or on the no-fly list.
Only my mom could, but not me and my dad, because both me and my dad are on the watch list.
Now they say they want to expand that to where if you haven't paid your taxes, you can't buy a gun. Of course, these are taxes to the IRS, and they just say you haven't paid. The bankers are taking control of our lives. They are squeezing Europeans with the exact same system. This is hardcore fascism. This is incredible tyranny, and we've got to defeat this legislation that is now in the House. Get these articles and get them out to everybody and demand that the corporate whore dinosaur media cover this, because these are internal checkpoints, internal passports, and they're saying they're going to revoke your citizenship. That's what this does, extrajudicially. This is off the Richter scale when it comes to despotic, oppressive tyranny. The Federal Reserve is engaged in a total coup d'etat over due process and threatening to revoke our citizenship and pull our passports if we don't fully submit to the bankers. The bankers are pressuring local governments to raise the local property tax that we didn't have till 60 years ago in this country that turns your property into basically a government rental. This is not land of the free, home of the brave anymore. Okay? We're off the charts tyranny. It's time to recognize it, rebuke it, arrest these scumbag New World Order people, and take our government back. Because this is all going to be selectively enforced. Massive numbers of Congress don't pay taxes. Most of these federal employees don't, and they're left alone. Criminal Congress can insider trade and say they're allowed to. Corzine can steal billions, lie to Congress and get caught and not get in trouble. But these crooks run the Federal Reserve and its IRS collection agency, and they're saying they're going to take anything they want without even a court hearing and take your passport. We've got to get this information out to everybody. This just proves how tyrannical these scum are.
And so we can move on to other corruption in the government, other little scandals going on, although this one's been far splashier and probably less substantial. As you know from all the mainstream reports over the weekend, Obama's trip to Colombia was compromised when Secret Service people were accused of not paying hookers. And then they brought in members of the military and others, and they've detained them and taken them back home, and they're getting ready to charge them with violating the Secret Service codes. That's if we were even told the truth. We really don't know. It's hard to believe that this would have broken out into a major news scandal rather than just being covered up from within. If indeed this is going on, we know high-level officials are engaged of all kinds of unspeakable things, but why is this happening now in the middle of the Summit of the Americas? Is it because there's the Cuba question on the table from a number of Latin American countries calling to open back up negotiations there in terms of the U.S. to do away with the travel bans there, to take off sanctions? Does it have to do with the fact that multiple Latin American countries are saying it's time to legalize and decriminalize drugs because the drug war has failed, putting incredible pressure on the U.S. to respond to the obvious failure of the drug war, all the scandals where they've been caught propping up drug cartels, shipping in themselves from Afghanistan and other military-guarded locales? Is it because Wall Street has been caught laundering so much drug money? Does it have to do with all the partnerships and unions and global agreements they're trying to do with these Latin American countries, which are routinely protested and very unpopular with the people? Or does it have to do with the questions raised by Gordon Duff in the Veterans Today article? Was the presidential detail penetrated by an assassin? Assassination Colombia, what if it ain't about whores? And he gets into how the story seems very unbelievable because of the factors we mentioned, because power tends to corrupt, but it also tends to cover up for its own scandals, not really wishing to reach the media. And so Gordon Duff raises the question, was the Secret Service, was the military, was the president's detail possibly infiltrated by someone from a foreign government or representing something else? You've got them trying to push for the Iran war, and the U.S. has at least initially said no to that. You've got other factors going on.